to be looking at a very unique story in the Old Testament. This is one of those days where I was really close to calling David and just, he preached for over 50 years, and I was close to calling him and saying, today's the day. But by God's grace, we'll get through this. And I do love this story. I haven't heard many people speak about it, and so hopefully we'll glean some truths from this story. But it starts back in chapter 6, and it says that sometime later, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mobilized his entire army and marched up and laid a siege to Samaria. There was a great famine in the city, and the siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver and a quarter of a cob of seed pods for 5 shekels. So you guys might have noticed over the past several years that the food in the grocery stores has been climbing up in price. I mean, it's been like inflation. And it's also deflation because the food is getting smaller, right? You just open up the chips and it's just a bunch of air and sadness. And then eggs. I mean, I saw eggs for $9, $8.99 a dozen. I'm like, what is going on? We need to get chicken. See, years ago we had chickens, and I did all the math, and I was like, this egg cost me like $1, because by the time you buy feed and it can add up. But now it sounds like a good deal. But inflation, when food costs more, when you get less food for more money, that's what we've been dealing with in our country. And here, the Samaritans are dealing with severe inflation because they're being besieged. There's an army surrounding them. They can't get in or out. And so eventually something like a donkey's head is just now becoming an outrageous, expensive luxury. And I have a little bit of experience with this because I processed my own pig. I have no idea, but she was this gigantic pig. I have no idea how much she weighed. And I read about people making head cheese out of the pig's head. I'm like, I don't want any part of this pig to go to waste. So I tried it, and so you pulling that pig's head out of the pot, I'm like, no thanks. She was furry, and anyway. So think about a donkey's head, and that being a luxury, only the rich can afford it. Some translations talk about instead of a cob of seed pods, talk about doves droppings. And so basically the people were starving. And this might seem like a very obscure story as we read it, but it does, I think, have a very meaningful and pertinent application to us. And so this story gets very dark before it gets better. But we read, as the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, there's a woman that cried out to him, "Help me, my lord the king." And then the king replied, "If the Lord does not help you, where can I get help for you? From the threshing floor, from the winepress?" And then he asked her, "Well, what's the matter?" And she answered and said, this woman said to me, "Give up your son so we may eat him today, and tomorrow we'll eat my son." And so we cooked my son and ate him. And the next day I said to her, "Hey, give up your son so we may eat him," but she's hidden him. So do you remember the story about King Solomon, and a woman accidentally killed one of her infants and switched it with the baby of another, and they were arguing over who was the rightful mother. And Solomon said, "Bring the sword and we'll kill him." And the real mother said, No, she can have him." This is a much darker twist on even that. And so the king is helpless, and he says, "If God doesn't help you, how am I going to help you?" There's nothing in the threshing floor, where they process the wheat. There's nothing in the wine press. But he does ask her, well, what is the matter? And so imagine hearing this as a king. It says, when the king heard the woman's words, he tore his robes. It really hits him how hungry and desperate the people are. So there's a famine, there's a siege, the people are starving, desperate, and the king is confronted with what people are going through. Under his robes, he has sackcloth on his body. That's revealed when he tears his robes. He's mourning, he's grieving, and he says, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if the head of Elisha, son of Shaphat, remains on his shoulders today. So he sends messengers to go get Elisha. He's going to take vengeance out on the man of God. And while he was still talking to them, the messenger came down to him. The king said, this disaster is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? So you have two different responses when you're facing crisis such as these people are. You can wait on the Lord, or you can throw your hands up in the air and say, I can't count on him. I can't rely on him. I've been waiting for so long. It's gotten to the point where things are just so bleak and so dark that even God couldn't help me now. So those are the two responses. Elisha's waiting on God, and the king has come to the point where he says, I can't. I'm done. I've been waiting. I've been trying, and now God is to blame. And that's natural for us to go through sometimes. It's not the right thing to do, not the right feelings to have, but you look at the life of Job and how he lost everything, and in all that he never sinned. He never cursed God. Everyone around him was saying that God was against Job. Even his wife said, curse God and die. But Job remained faithful. So there's two responses. And isn't hope important? When you don't have any hope, or when you feel like you can't even count on God, I mean, just imagine how hopeless you would feel. In chapter 7, Elisha replies to this. Hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says. At about this time tomorrow, a seah of the finest flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. So he's saying this inflation is going to end in 24 hours. I mean, from absolute starvation to overabundance, where food is readily available and even the poor can afford it. But the officer on whose arm the king was leaning said to the man of God, even if the Lord would open the floodgates of heaven, could this happen? Even if God opened the floodgates of heaven, could even God do this? And so Elisha said, well, you'll see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat any of it. It's kind of an obscure story, right? Where are we going with this? Well, it says, now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. And they said to each other, why should we stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, well, the famine is there, and we will die. We'll starve, right? If we stay here, we will die. We'll starve. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die. So it's like, if we stay here, we'll die. If we go into the city, we'll die. If we go to this enemy army, maybe, just maybe, they'll have mercy on us and spare us. So, what would you do? Take a chance, right? Wave the white flag. Compliment them like, oh, wow, hair looks nice today. Is that a new shirt you're wearing? Please don't kill me. But why are they at the entrance of the city gate? Lepers, right? They are unclean. So if you think about the situation of the people in the city, how dark and difficult that is, the leper situation was even worse. And yet they decide to take a chance. It says at dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans, this army that's all surrounded, got them all walled off. And when they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. So everyone's huddled in the city, they're starving to death. The lepers go out to the camp, and there's no one there. There's tents, but there's no one there. It's a ghost town. Why is that? The Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses in a great army. They all flee. They leave everything behind. They just go into a frenzy, and they start to leave. They throw their weapons and armor down. They leave all their supplies, their tents, they're abandoned. So, verse 8, the men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp, and they entered one of the tents, and they ate and drank. Right? Then they took silver and gold and clothes and went off and hid them. And then they returned to another tent and took some things from it and hid them also. Wow. So, naturally, they haven't eaten in so long, and then there's all this food. There's even gold and silver and clothing. And so they're just gorging themselves. And I would be too, right? I would be too. But then they say to each other, what we're doing is not right. Why? This is a day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let us go at once and report this to the royal palace. Some translations say the king's household. You know where this is going? And the people, they go and tell the king's household, they tell and long story short, the king thinks it's a trick, he thinks it's a trap, so they send scouts out, they're very cautious. They don't just all run out there at once, but they discover, no, that the camp really is deserted, there really is abundant food, supplies, everything you can imagine. It says the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. And so a seah of the finest flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel, as the Lord had said. Now, we're not going to read it, but the man who said, even if God opened the floodgates of heaven, even God himself could never provide for us in such a way. He gets trampled in the gates, and so that prophecy came true. He saw it, but never ate of it. He doubted the Lord's provision. So, what is the application of this story? In the book of Isaiah we read, "Come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters. And you without money, come and buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost." Why spend money on that which is not bread, and your labor on that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and your soul will delight in the richest of foods. Here God tells us that so often we succumb to a self-inflicted inflation. where we spend our money on what isn't even bread. We give our money and our hearts and our time, our resources, our very desires over to things that do not fill us, that do not satisfy us, do not nurture us, are not good for us. And we spend everything to get it. Like people throw their entire lives away chasing after things that end up destroying them, end up poisoning them, or at the very least leaving them malnourished, leaving them empty inside. You guys have seen the world do this, right? You've seen people who have it all, it seems. They've got the fame and the fortune, they've got even good looks, and yet they find themselves empty. They find themselves utterly depressed, and they start giving themselves over to things like drugs and alcohol just to fill this void because they thought they had it all, and they realize that it's just not enough. And so God offers this invitation. There is infinite, free satisfaction in Jesus. That's why he says, come buy it, but buy it without money, without cost. He says, why are you spending your lives on things that don't satisfy? When Jesus said in John 6, I am the bread of life, and whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. He's saying that he is that which satisfies. He's that infinite resource of heavenly bread. You know, many, many years before, the Israelites were starving in the wilderness. And what did God send them? They were hungry. Manna. He sent them manna, right? It literally came down from heaven. And they were able to just gather. They didn't have to pay anyone anything for it. They just gathered it and they ate it. It was God's provision. But Jesus says that he is the bread of life. He's the true manna from heaven who comes down from God. And so when we look at this story, at least for me, I realize I'm one of the lepers. Right? I'm a leper. Because on my own, unclean, unfit. On my own, I have nothing with which to sustain myself. In desperate need of food. And by God's grace, I've been given the good news that everything we feared, death, we fear death, we fear starvation, we fear that our eternal lives are not secure. We fear the enemy. And out of God's grace, I've come to realize, come to know that God has taken away the threat. There are so many people who are still fearing the enemy, and they don't realize that the enemy has fled. For all intents and purposes, that the enemy has fled. God has overcome the threat of death and sin and condemnation because of what Jesus did. So I view myself as one of the lepers who's been given this, by God's grace, this knowledge that there's infinite joy to be had, infinite life to be had, life abundant. I can come and eat bread without cost. So the question is, if we've been given this knowledge and we keep it to ourselves, how does God feel about that? Even these lepers realize, there's more here than we could ever eat in a lifetime. Meanwhile, there are many, many people in God's household who are lost, who are dying, who are starving for this good news. The leper said, if we wait, if we keep this to ourselves, if we hoard it, then some trouble will come upon us. Jesus said in Matthew 28, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. Paul mentions that people cannot come to Christ unless someone tells them. Someone can't tell them unless they're sent. For some reason, God puts the task upon us to share the good news. And there are probably millions of reasons why he does this. But I think one reason is that if you are a sinner who's been brought to life in Jesus, and Ephesians 2 says that we were all dead in our trespasses and sins. If you are a sinner who's been brought to life in Jesus, you have a story to tell people. You know what it's like to have been in darkness. You know what it's like to have been hopeless. And you know what it is like to have found Jesus, the answer to all of our problems. And so we are well equipped to share this good news with people who are still in darkness. The phrase walking dead comes to my mind sometimes when I think about people who are walking around this earth, this planet, going to work, going to school, paying their taxes, and going to the grocery store, and yet spiritually they're still dead. Jesus gave us the job to do. Go into all the world and tell them. Tell them what you freely received, what God has freely given. And so when Isaiah says that we can come and eat bread without cost, what he means is without cost to us. Because there was a cost. Jesus, as they were eating, Jesus took the bread and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. There was a cost. It's just paid by him, not us. So, I guess the point of this is to remember that we're the lepers. If you've been brought to Jesus, you know that what people fear most is no longer a threat. People fear missing out, living this life and entering into the unknown without having some sense of eternity, some sense of permanence. But they're looking for it in all the wrong ways. They're eating donkey heads. They're eating doves droppings. They're offering their own children in many cases. There's good news. Infinite forgiveness for the world through Jesus. He's already paid the price. The enemy's already vanquished and gone. We just need to tell people. So as we take the Lord's Supper together this morning, I invite you to reflect on your helplessness and hopelessness without Jesus, but the provision He's given you infinite provision. So God bless you all. And as we look to the cross, look to our Savior, we remember there was a cost. And it has been paid. So God bless us all as we take communion together.